Hello there, Sid Smith. Sid Smith is he's actually this week he's on the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro, and I'm in a deep subterranean cave. Again, we've managed to get the up and the down. It's like the concept for a Peter Gabriel album or tour. Many people have asked me, how can you spend so much money on these locations for this very spectacular podcast? And the answer to that is quite simple. And it's partly to do with Sid himself, because one of Sid's little projects is one of our sponsors of this project. And I don't know if you've heard of it. It's Sid Smith's Dry London Gin. And they've been sponsored. They've been sponsoring us since the beginning. So thanks, Sid. I know it's a kind of lucrative side venture for you. Sid Smith's Gin. You see it in all the shops. And I've been really pleased to be able to get a few cases of this gin free from yourself. And I look forward to receiving more of them.
I think while we're on the subject of sponsorship,
yeah,
I think it's probably worth saying that you can still buy your cans of Sid Smith.
Oh yeah, Sid Smith. Since the gin was so successful, you took over Heinz, and that was a big thing. And Sid Smith's beans. I like your tin of beans backing the Who there, Teenage Cancer Trust, which I've got a tin of those around the corner. Yeah, so
anyway,
well, that was a message from our sponsors there, who both seem to be you, which is rather extraordinary. Well, we're on episode 34 of Idiot Wind, which is our blundering bluster through the collected works of Bob Dylan on vinyl. And since our last meeting, aeons ago, Sid's not changed, as he's usually a very scruffy person. I'm wearing a different t-shirt, as you can see. Bob's been quite busy touring, basically. He's been doing loads of touring. We mentioned last time the bootleg series, which had been started up again in the wake of Time Out of Mind. In between Love and Theft and Modern Times, we get this double album, which is live in 1964 at the Philharmonic Hall in New York. A very young Bob singing songs that became classics. Times They Are Changing is on there. It Ain't Me, Babe, With God on Our Side. Don't Think Twice, It's All Right. A double album. And some of that features, for those of you with a more resilient hearing, it features the voice of Joan Baez as well. And then another album, which was, that was volume 6. Volume 5 before that was an album that's been somewhat superseded now. This is the Rolling Thunder Tour. Bob Dylan live in 1975. And that's a double album as well. It's like a compilation of the best of the tour. There's some tremendous stuff on this. But now, of course, we've had the Scorsese film since then, and the 14 CD box set of that tour. So if you want to do that, and then talking of Martin Scorsese, in 2005, 2006, we had No Direction Home, which is Scorsese's brilliant film about the young Bob Dylan leading up to that moment in Bootleg Series Volume 4 when he gets called Judas on stage in Manchester. And this is the 2-disc compilation of early material that was released in the Bootleg Series Volume 7 to coincide with that. But of course, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the new album, which came out in 2006 and is in fact Modern Times, with another fantastic cover. This is a photo, Taxi New York at Night, courtesy of the Howard Greenberg Gallery, New York. And this is, again, Bob and his band, produced by the mysterious, not very mysterious at all, Jack Frost. And again, it's Bob, Tony Garnier, his new drummer, George Rossili, Stu Kimball and Denny Freeman on guitars, and Donny Heron on steel guitar, violin, viola, and mandolin. This is the live band again. This is his latest live band. There's a photo of them. You can see them looking very happy to be there on that photograph. And again, recording basically live on this album. Again, the engineer is Chris Shaw, very faithful Bob Dylan sideband of the later years. There's some amazing photos here on the inner sleeve, just taken from bits of that big photo I've just shown you. And in case you've not seen enough of it, the cover photo again. Again, a lot of time spent on that, and it's really the album designs that the creators of this magazine take their design and content inspiration from. Right, what to say about this? Well, just before I presage what I'm going to say, there are some good tunes on this. And there's some nonsense on this as well, it has to be said. Principally, what I do object to is things like rolling and tumbling and the levee's going to break. This is just lazy recreation of old records. Rolling and Tumbling is basically a Muddy Waters song for which Bob Dylan takes full credit on this record. And the levee's going to break. Well, we've all heard a million versions of that. Surely anyone who's heard a blues record of the levee's going to break, they shouldn't be on here. They're nonsense. Thunder on the Mountain is okay as an opener. The main thing about it is he keeps singing about Alicia Keys, the young singer. I've been thinking about Alicia Keys, Sid. He's been thinking about her perhaps a bit too much, I'd say. He obviously quite likes the look of Alicia Keys. He wanders in the world where Alicia Keys can be, and he knows where he wants her to be. I wish he'd not told us that. Someday Baby here, that's quite interesting because a few years later, after Modern Times, Bob released an album called Telltale Signs, which was outtakes basically from the later period. So from everything from Oh Mercy on. So Oh Mercy, Time Out of Mind, Love and Theft, and this are the principal sessions where he takes that from. And there's a brilliant version of Someday Baby on that, you know. And I didn't recognize it at all for the version of. It's obviously the same song when you play them side by side, which I have done this week in part of my work as research in this. And I'll tell you this, the version on the Telltale Signs is lovely. It's just lovely. It's atmospheric. It's stirring. And then you've got the version here. Working Man Blues number 2, and When the Deal Goes Down, are quite straightforward. You know, it's just got some nice moments. But to me, I must say, this entire album strikes me as an attempt to do Love and Theft number 2 that misses the mark by about a mile. And for me, it only hits the track. It only hits the mark on 2 tracks. One is Nettie Moore, which is his incredible rewrite of an old song called Nettie Moore, infinitely superior in every way. And I saw him do Nettie Moore. I think it must have been about 2007, 2008 at Sheffield. And I burst into tears that the version was so beautiful on stage. But much better than this, but this is still very good.
I've burst into tears several times listening to various Bob Dylan.
Yeah, but no, it reminded me of when I saw him in 1998, shortly after the release of Time Out of Mind, when a mate of mine had died at the age of 35, a contemporary of mine. And I made the stupid decision to drive all the way up from here to Manchester to see Bob Dylan, supported by Van Morrison. I got to the massive Manchester Arena just at time to see the last 2 minutes of Van Morrison. And later I counted my lucky stars. I didn't choose to go to the Birmingham gig because on that night, beyond all expectation and uniquely on the tour, Bob decided to go on before Van in Birmingham. And people were doing the same as I'd done, and ended up seeing 2 minutes of Bob Dylan and an entire set by Van Morrison. Why he chose to do that, I don't know. But anyway, I saw all Bob that night, and he was excellent. He did material from Time Out of Mind and Oh Mercy and stuff, and a lot of oldies. But he did Forever Young that night. He just suddenly broke into Forever Young, and I think it's mainly because my friend had died at the age.
Yeah, sure.
A very beautifully sung Forever Young was emotional, and those are the 2 times I've cried watching Bob Dylan. Then Nettie Moore at Sheffield. It must have been about 2007, 2008. I could get the ticket out if you want, but who cares? It's not important. But I think Nettie Moore is a beautiful song about an older person missing the only person he knows he ever really loved. And it's an old subject, but it's beautifully done. And the other song, I think, which some people don't like, but I love, is the closing track, Ain't Talking, which I think is very dramatic and very well written, and would fit well on Love and Theft or Time Out of Mind. This album is regarded by many as the third in the trilogy of these three albums, which is probably fair. There are more links between these albums lyrically and musically, and the recasting of old stuff for modern times. There are more connections than dissimilarities. But I just think that Modern Times, highly acclaimed at the time, is in fact by far the weakest of the three. What did you think, Sid?
Well, you know, as I always say on these occasions, every time we do this, you know, it's difficult. I'm not the target audience and etc. But I do, just for the record, I do try and engage with the music.
Yeah.
I don't just sort of sit there thinking, right, you know, I'm not adversarial with it. I'm always open to being charmed.
Yes.
And always want to be, and every now and again I am, you know, to be fair. Love and Theft, there is an issue when you listen to when I listen to two Bob Dylan albums back to back, as I did do for this. So I listened to Love and Theft, and Love and Theft is an album I got I listened to it 3 times. With Modern Times, I made the mistake of listening to it back to back, and I can't do two Bob. The thing I've discovered is I can't do 2 Bob Dylan albums back to back. It just doesn't go in, you know. And so I found, for example, what was that last track called?
On this album?
Yeah.
Ain't Talking.
Yeah, Ain't Talking. So, for example, on one occasion I remembered, I'd put the track on and then left the room to go downstairs to make a pot of tea. And what I've discovered is it takes, for me to make a pot of tea from scratch, it takes a shade under 8 minutes and 48 seconds, because as I was coming up...
What's the significance of that time, Sid?
Well, time and Bob Dylan, there's a subject all its own. But by the time I came back upstairs with me tea tray and me pot of tea, that track was just about to finish. And as I say, that's not really an ideal way to engage with it.
No.
Being in a different room, in a different part of the house, where you can't basically hear it. But I had listened to it on 2 previous occasions. I found the album a bit kind of just. It has some of the qualities of Love and Theft. I think you're right. There's a sort of there's one of the tracks, I can't remember which one it was now. You know, it has a sort of nice shuffly feel to it. There's an old world charm to some of it, perhaps. But there's nothing. I didn't find anything particularly distinguishing on it. But as I say, you know, that's not to say there aren't distinguishing things. It's just that it doesn't hold much for me. The performances all seem, you know, fairly, you know, as you would expect them to be, competent. And I think that's the thing. There does seem to be this phenomenon with Dylan albums. You know, one album gets hailed as oh, it's a return to form. You know, there's a lot of that goes on over the years as you read through, or as you read back through the critical reaction. You know, there's a body of critics who are desperate for the best album since, and it's usually they usually say Blood on the Tracks, don't they? Or whichever one has replaced Blood on the Tracks. Time Out of Mind might be the one.
You see, that's the problem for me. This isn't the best album since Time Out of Mind.
No.
On the tracks, that's. I think this is by far the weakest album since Time Out of Mind. So
I mean, I think this is better than whatever the last weakest album was.
I mean, he's undergone some kind of. When we were talking about those dreadful albums in the 80s, it was like he was dead. It was like he was creatively dead. But now, whatever you say about this album, and I've got quite a lot of critical things to say about it, it's nowhere near as dreadful as Down in the Fucking Groove or Knocked Out Loaded. Those albums seem to be a different person, a dead person.
I think that's also interesting. I think he's got. I mean, the fact that he's working with what amounts to his live touring band, it's an environment that he's quite comfortable with. And as I think we've said in the past, the one thing you can say about this stuff is he likes to get this music down.
Yes.
I'm thinking more of Love and Theft here, really, if I'm honest. But he likes to get this music. He likes to work quite fast with the recordings, and has done for decades. And I think with Love and Theft, it sounds good, actually. I mean, I think it suits. And this one I'm sure, would have been done in a very similar way, if not the same. But the deficiency for me, the thing that I struggle with Dylan albums is for all the layering of the lyric, etc., which you have explained to me, and I find that interesting. I genuinely do, because I don't get those references, so it's something I can go back to. But I do wish Dylan was a better melodicist. I wish he gave as much thought and care to to articulating a melody, whereas the melodies are just kind of sort of static things. The melodies really are so scant, and they are just there so he can read out these words, and that's. It's that constant imbalance for me. I might engage with the words more if there was more melodic information for me to go on to, but that's ridiculous to say that, because the delivery is part and parcel. I mean, it's Bob Dylan. This is how Bob Dylan delivers. He delivers songs with kind of monotone melodies, and if I haven't understood that after all these years, decades of Dylan, then I'm sort of so yeah. I it would be wrong to say I struggled with this album, because I didn't struggle with it, and I think that's maybe part of the problem with this album. It kind of just chugs along, and it's.
I think although I disagree with all 99.9% of the things you say about Bob Dylan, I will agree with that. I think the word for this album is perfunctory.
Yeah.
I think on Love and Theft, he sounds like he's a man on a mission. Whether you agree with the mission is up to you. But he sounds like the band is on fire, and he sounds like we've got these songs, let's blast them out. I don't feel that with this. I think this album speaks of a bit of a struggle to get this down, and I think the band sound, and he sounds not nearly as engaged.
I think you're right about that, and I think that's a dead good point. For me, if I'm going to listen to Bob Dylan, then I don't. If I have to listen to Bob Dylan, then I don't. Give me a Bob Dylan that's got a bit of get up and go. It has a bit of vim and vigor about it. The songs, for me, there's too many songs like this. The songs that are like a song like When the Deal Goes Down. Ah, man, I don't know how long that song is, but it I mean, you know, it kind of just, it's interminable. And the other one, the last one, Ain't Talking, you know, the down tempo stuff doesn't work. I mean, there's sometimes the recreation, if you like, of the very old, you know, sort of 30s, 40s kinds of vibe and feel. That works quite nicely, but in a down tempo context. But the benefit, it seems to me, of having an up tempo Bob Dylan is that you might think we'd get through the songs quicker, but of course this is Bob Dylan, so you know the songs are going to take as long as they're going to take. But at least they're up tempo, and at least the band are, you know, kind of rattling along. When it goes down tempo, it drags me down with it. I do struggle with it. But
I do think the words to Ain't Talking are very interesting. I said on the last album he's using Virgil a lot. On this album, the two people he's accused of ripping off are Ovid, poet Ovid, and Norman Timrod, who I'd never heard of, who is an American Civil War poet, who he does use in a similar way to the way he uses Mark Twain on Theft. And he actually did lose his rag when in interview, when questioned about that, are you ripping off? He said, well, did you know who Norman Timrod was before this album came out? That was one thing. And secondly, if you think it's easy what I do, you have a go at doing it. He said that, and that's the first time I've seen him rattled by this criticism. He was just pissed off with the idea of being questioned, which I think is fair enough, to be fair. And it's only Professor Thomas, my old friend here, was when he performatively lost his temper, he was actually again quoting someone, and it was one of Virgil's biographers. When he uses almost the same words in that interview as he does in that book written about around the time of the birth of Christ. and I just find this very interesting as well, that he's obviously performing in these interviews, and he's obviously working out, as all people do are interviewed a lot, like he is. I mean, there's the whole thing about Dylan being this person who's never interviewed. That's just bollocks. He's interviewed a lot. And at the time of Love and Theft, he chose to have his only press conference where he met journalists together, collectively and individually, in Rome, which is again interesting when you realize what his source material is for some of these lines. That's all lovely and interesting stuff, as I'm sure you would say, but I like to listen to a record, and Love and Theft to me is a record I like to listen to. And this album, I've always found it's an enjoyable listen, and it's quite pleasant, but I don't think it lands like Love and Theft lands. Apart from on that last track and on Nettie Moore.
Have you figured out why it doesn't land? Like, is there a thing that you can point to and say this is why it doesn't land for you?
What I'm thinking is we are coming. I think late Dylan is an interesting period of its own, and there's a lot to commend it. I think in this album we are coming to the end of this period that lasts from Time Out of Mind to Modern Times. I think we are. I think his interest in it is running out. I think the fuel it's giving him is running out, and then we go into a series of transitional periods after this, and we'll reach the first one with the next record we discuss. But where he's trying to find another way to get his creativity going in the way the seam he first started to plow on Time Out of Mind can sustain him, and he finds it. He often finds it difficult, and he often, you know, with the position he's in with his record label now, this is the first struggle, so he'll stop doing it. He doesn't have to put a record out every year. No. He doesn't have to do that, and if he doesn't think he's got anything to write, he either does other people's songs, like the two albums we discussed, where he's doing cover versions of old songs. He'll do a series of cover versions very shortly. He'll start doing, but they'll all be for a reason. With the two we've already done, it's to. This isn't working, making records like this in the 80s and early 90s. Apart from Oh Mercy, he's not pleased with any of the records, so he'll go back to his roots. That's what he did, and he'll rebuild his writing and interest in writing to eventually emerge with Time Out of Mind. There's another reason for the songs he's going to do in the future, but now I think that seam, it's running out. I think his interest in it is running out, and I think he's feeling the interest subsiding for him a bit in making new records after these 3 albums. And I think he has bursts of enthusiasm for the next part of his career. And the enthusiasm is now running out on this record. There are some lovely moments on it. There's some lovely lines. There's some funny moments. There's some very, there's some very dramatic lines on Ain't Talking, but I don't think it's sustained. I think it sustains, as I've said, convincingly. It's pleasant and it's entertaining, this record. It only convinces me for those 2 songs. And I think he's starting to doubt himself again. And what will happen next will be a surprise in many ways, but it'll be interesting for another reason what he does next. And then he does something else interesting, and then he does something else different to that. But I think the early burst of creativity that fueled this rebirth with Time Out of Mind is now starting to fade a bit. That's what I think is wrong with this.
It's interesting, all of that. Going back to my sort of problem of listening to 2 albums back to back, for me, I can't sustain the attention. And I think it sounds, from what you're saying, it's like Dylan can't sustain the attention and needs to kind of. He seems to do this. He seems to have like one album where everything starts
working, then it fades away, then he has to go back and regroup.
Which is fair enough. And just for the by, that the concerns about plagiarism, as I said, for when it was raised in Love and Theft, that just seems to me to be kind of so wide of the mark.
And also that title, in inverted commas, he's saying, look what I'm doing.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I'm like, if you like, a Dylan skeptic,
I think
the last thing I would say, is point to and say, oh, plagiarism. I mean, unless it was like right there in your face. Borrowing lines from different forms of literature and poetry, etc. That's not plagiarism. But anyway, I kind of what's the one track then that you'd focus on and take away to the mythical desert island?
Nettymore.
All right, yeah. I didn't mind Nettymore. Kind of when I have a problem with a Dylan album, my default is to always, as you will be able to predict,
the shortest song.
My default is always the shortest song, and the computer reveals to me that the shortest.
So you're looking on you're like someone on a famous website where they look at the graphical equalizer, DR levels. Yeah, that's the highest, or that's the lowest. That's the one I like. Yeah, and you're now looking at the times on these albums, the running times on this track. That's the best one.
the track that is the shortest, I believe, although I haven't double checked this, but the album that the track that is the shortest is actually the track I would have picked. Interestingly enough,
what track is that?
That's Someday Baby.
You're joking.
I don't mind Someday Baby.
You should hear the version on Telltale Signs. That's all.
Yeah, well, I kind
much
of
better than this
because
a different song.
The version of Someday Baby on here has the virtue of not only is it short, it's kind of up tempo, and I kind of if I must do it, I must have a happy Bob rather than a kind of a moody Bob or a philosophical Bob.
Well, thank you, Professor Smith, for your insights there to this,
What's
towering
the
genius.
what's the album that we're going to, in my case, be inflicted? Is going to be inflicted upon us.
Well, next time we gather together, we'll be discussing Together Through Life.
God, I don't think I've even ever heard of that one.
Well, Together Through Life is the next album.
Much like you and I.
We're bound together through life. Yes, we are. But by the great the great panda is, in our case, is Bob Dylan. Yes, he's brought us together for nefarious purposes.
Right. I'm going to stop recording.
I don't blame you.